are, it's been added to every FHF contract. So all of them will be conducting those trainings. They send out newsletters and things to announce when they're having them. So you may want to sign up for their listservs.
Yeah, because I kind of just wanted to see, like, read what the training was about. And I'm on the Southwest Louisiana website just seeing what I can dig around.
All right, everyone, it is 3 o'clock, which is our scheduled meeting time. We're still waiting on one of our other guests. Oh, look, she just arrived. So if we could transition Miss Foster Hagen and Miss Jordan to panelists, that would be great. Bambi asked in the chat if Melissa Bacon will be attending. Do we know if she was supposed to come to the meeting today?
She responded to the emails that you all had. So I sent her the information. I can double check to make sure that she registered, but I was under the impression that she was attending.
Okay. So what we can do is do member intros first and then do January meeting summary and regroup after that if she still hasn't joined us yet. But today we actually have a couple new members, which is really exciting. So firstly, I would like to say hi. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Lelaine Dejean. I am the chair of this committee, and we have a new member. Are they still with us? Oh, Cheney, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Cheney Gidger.
Thank you, Cheney. And then we also have Harlan. Would you like to introduce yourself to the committee?
Sure, thank you. Hi, I'm Harlan Kalser, and I work as the Adult Program Coordinator with Families Helping Families of Acadiana, and I also work as Disability Awareness Coordinator with the Mayor President's Office in Lafayette. Thank you all for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We're so happy to have you both, Harlan and Cheney, so thank you for being a part of our committee. So the next on my screen, I have Jill Hano. Would you like to go?
Hello, I'm Jill Hano, and my video doesn't work, so sorry. I'm from Region 10, and I'm the DD Council member at large.
Awesome. Thank you, Jill. And I see Melissa Bayham has joined us. Hello, how are you?
Hi. Good afternoon. I was going to say good morning.
I almost did the same thing earlier.
I'm sorry. You know how like Zooms are great, but then people still come to your office. So sorry I'm late.
No worries. We're just doing quick member introductions. We introduce Harlan and Cheney, two of our new members. And next we have, on my screen at least, Maddie. Maddie, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Oh, wait. Hold on. Hi, my name is Maddie, and I'm 15 years old, and I'm a sophomore at St. James High, and thank you guys for having me.
Thank you, Maddie. We always love hearing your input. Next on my screen, we have Bambi.
Did you say my name?
Yes.
Okay, I think everyone knows me. Hi, I'm the director for the Governor's Office of Disability Affairs.
Okay, and then Nicole Flores.
Hey, I'm Nicole Flores. I am the Executive Director of Families Helping Families of Acadiana and proud parent of a little self-advocate of my own.
Who is also named Lillian, and my mom is also named Nicole, which is wild.
It's very confusing.
Yes, yes. The next person I have on my screen is Liz Gary.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Liz Gary, parent advocate, and I also am the policy and advocacy coordinator for the LEND program at the LSU HDC.
Thank you. And the last person I have on our screen is our other youth advocate, Dylan. Dylan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Sonny, and actually glad to see that the group has gotten bigger and better, and I'm really glad to hear that. And so I haven't been on here for a while. School has been catching up with me and everything, and trying to focus on my senior year. But I'm really glad that the group is getting better and better, and I'm looking forward to it growing, you know. And also to let y'all know that my screen is also not working, so I won't be able to show my face either, but hopefully I can get it solved probably after this meeting or wherever I can, hopefully. So yeah.
Thank you, Dylan, and we wish you the best of luck with your technical issues. Melissa, would you like to go next?
Hi, my name is Melissa Baham, and I am the Director of Louisiana Rehabilitation Services, and I am also a member of the DD Council.
Thank you. Miss Julie?
Hey, everybody. I'm Julie Foster Hagan, and I'm the Assistant Secretary for the Office for Citizens with Developmental Disabilities in the Louisiana Department of Health.
Thank you for joining us today. And last but not least, Miss Jordan.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Meredith Jordan, Executive Director for Diverse Learners at the Louisiana Department of Education.
Thank you. And so a big thank you to our guests, especially for joining us today. And thank you to our new members for joining us. As Dylan mentioned, we've had some growth in our committee, which is really, really exciting. And we're just, I think, really excited about the possibility of hosting YLF here again, possibly next summer. And so the first thing that we have on our agenda is just some housekeeping, which would be the approval of the January meeting summary. So would someone like to make a motion to approve that summary?
I make a motion to approve the summary from the January meeting.
This is Bambi, I second.
Thank you. Any objections or abstentions? Cool. Hearing none, the motion passes. So the first thing after our approval of the January meeting summary is our funding discussion with the Louisiana Rehab Services, OCDD, and LDOE. But I first want to give a little bit of background of YLF and specifically our YLF here for our guests who may have not been here before, because I think it's really important to know that context of where this committee is coming from. And so YLF is essentially a summer camp for youth with disabilities, and it teaches them self-advocacy skills, life skills, and just generally empowers them to be an adult with a disability who can manage their services, live independently, and live a happy and fulfilling life. And so over 30 other states are currently hosting YLFs. And we actually had a YLF here from 2000 to 2005, but it dissolved because of funding issues. There wasn't a sustainability plan in place. So I'm sure you're a bit curious about where the funding came from originally. And we've pieced together a bit of a a timeline of what this looked like back then. And funding came from the DDC, Families Helping Families of Jefferson, OCDD, LDOE, and it seems like a grant from the Human Development Center. So right now, our committee's focus is bringing YLF back to Louisiana. Obviously, we're housed under the DD Council as an ad hoc committee, but our goal is to host our first YLF in summer of 2023 with a total of 15 delegates over 3 days, and it being overnight. So I know that was a lot of information I just threw at everybody, but I would love if anyone else would add anything about, what we have been doing on the committee, or if we have any questions from our guests about what this could potentially look like.
We can talk about how we were looking at the national program and what we need to do and like the rules of the program to be able to do it in our state, the requirements.
Yeah, so there is a national association based out of California that creates guidelines for the different YLFs across the country. So there's kind of a coherency across the different states' YLF. The YLF has the flexibility to be tailored to each state, as long as it's within specific requirements. So, I mean, one of the most basic ones is you don't want to discriminate against the severity of the disability when taking on campers, or YLF calls it delegates. So we are keeping that in mind as we develop what we want our YLF to look like, and what impact we would like our YLF to have. So as a committee, we've been developing an overarching timeline for us to make decisions on what this is going to look like for Louisiana, and also to delegate the work out. Does anyone have anything else to add that I've missed?
Lillian, I guess I just need some more instructions of what right now, what are we supposed to be doing? Is this open up for us to give suggestions or recommendations, or are we waiting for some other prompt?
I think really this is a discussion between the committee and our guests about what YLF looks like, what it did look like, what we want it to look like here, and specifically as it pertains to potentially receiving funding from their state organs or organizations to execute a YLF. Jill, you have your hand raised.
So it's our intent to have one form funding source or multiple funding sources, or it just like depends on just how it goes?
I think that's a really interesting question. I know, each state has a different strategy as far as funding goes. There's some that's solely funded by their independent living centers, some that's solely funded by the DD Council. But I think that where we're heading, here and now is more of a collaborative approach between disability-focused state agencies and organizations, because that's what we had here before. And especially we would like to implement additionally, obviously, a sustainability plan this time. But I think because we understand that, the Department of Ed's role and OCDD's role and LRS's role is so important in the lives of individuals with disabilities, we want you guys to be involved. So Bambi, I see you have your hand raised.
Sure, I didn't have my mic unmuted. My questions would be, and what kind of I think brought everything together was that to look at. Well, first off, I'll say it's good to know the history that you provided, like who y'all think was involved in the funding and that type of thing. But I know the rules have changed since then in some ways around the programs that education funds or voc rehab funds or OCDD or CMS allows to be funds, or do we have state general funds? So I know some things have changed. So I guess the question to look at now is, do our state agency representatives, have they looked at or have an idea of what YLF does and its impact? And do they see some correlations in some funding streams that they may have that could help out with this?
Melissa?
Yes. So, and I think I mentioned on a previous call that vocational rehabilitation will more than likely be able to help to at least assist in funding this. It's easier for me to make that determination with some more once we get into some of the more specifics. And I'll give you some examples. Like, I see this as something that we can primarily fund with pre-employment transition services funds. But we have to make sure that if we do that, that the individuals qualify as students with disabilities, which means they have to be between the ages of 16 and 21 and be in some type of educational program, whether that be high school or post-secondary. But they would have to be, and I know in some of the material that you sent, Lillian, the age ranges kind of varied, and I think sometimes it would go over the 21 mark. So that would just be something that, depending on the specifics on what y'all determine, and it could be that we fund the individuals between 16 and 21, and maybe there's another potential funding source for the individuals who are older than 21. And then I would really need to look at the curriculum of what is actually going to be covered. Because like I said, in the materials that you provided, the majority of the topics appear to be covered in pre-employment transition services. And I would just have to verify that. If there was a portion for some reason, and I can't think of an example right now, but wouldn't be covered in those 5 areas that qualify under pre-employment transition services, that will be an area that I'll have to say, okay, we might need to look at a different area. Also, we can fund what we call maintenance expenses in pre-ets, which would be room and board and things like that. But that does, for LRS, require a financial needs test. So that will be something that I would just want everybody to be aware of. Our financial needs test is a lot more generous than it has been in the past. Our scale goes up to 500% of the poverty guidelines. And if an individual receives Social Security disability or SSI because of their own disability, they automatically qualify as meeting economic need. But I just kind of wanted to differentiate. There are certain services that we can pay for that it doesn't matter what your income or your family's income is, but some services we may have to look at the family's income for. So I say all that to say, when I look at this program, it looks great, and it really looks like a pre-ETS program to me. I would just have to get in the specifics. Once we get the specifics down, I can be a lot more direct on what we can pay, what we can fund, and what we can't fund. And then, needless to say, but I want to just go ahead and make sure I say it. And if we're going to fund it, those individuals would have to come through the VR program, and we would have to determine their eligibility. So we would have to get their medical documentation, or if they're in school, their IEPs and things like that. But I just wanted to mention that they would have to enter into the VR system for us to fund. So that was a lot of information. So I don't know if you have any questions.
I do. If you don't mind, I would love to know, so if there was hypothetically a session in YLF on the services that LRS provides, because introduction into the VR system can be overwhelming sometimes. It's a lot of information that you have to share and disclose. If LRS had a presentation at YLF, would then all of the delegates still be required to enter into the VR system, or would that intro be?
If we were going to present, no, absolutely not. I'm just speaking in terms of actually funding those students or those young individuals to be there. But we can definitely do a presentation. I can tell you that right now.
Okay. So we have a lot of hand raised. Let's go with questions for Ms. Bayham first before moving on. So I think Bambi was first.
So my question is, the model that you're talking about, Melissa, seems like a per person type situation, and I'm just wondering how that would work out for like long-term planning. Whenever, I think typically when you think about it, like just say for instance for like partners at the DD Council funds, there's a budget for the entire thing. It's one, and then they can make their do their budget in that way. I just can't wrap my head around how would you budget in the way that you described it.
I'm processing what you're saying, Bambi, but I know what you're saying. To not do it that way, we would have to do a contract, which I'm not opposed to doing, but I would still have to, the students would still have to apply for services, and we would still have to track the different services. Like, for example, pre-ets are 5 different activities, and we have to allocate the funds directly to those 5 different activities. So I'm wrapping my brain around what you're saying, but I think we could work it out some kind of way. But in order for you to have like a budget and know that that's your budget, it's very complicated. And what I mean by that is, like, we can budget, like, I'm just going to use whole numbers just off the top of my head, like $10,000. But then if for some reason you don't get enough participants that qualify for VR for whatever reason, I can't guarantee $10,000. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, more than likely, I mean, obviously the individuals that you're trying to get into this obviously have disabilities, but just it's just hard for me to guarantee funds, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you.
Jill, I think you're next.
Could we make
Jill, are you there?
that? Could we make that a criteria that that delegates have to be receiving these LRS services?
And that would be a decision of the council or this group. I don't know exactly how that works.
Isn't it a criteria for the council to be a waiver participant? Like, this question wasn't necessarily for you, Melissa. I'm just thinking and I know you are on the committee as well, but I'm just thinking that maybe thinking ahead, that with all this being said, that when we do our criteria for our delegates, we can say must be currently receiving LRS services.
And Jill, just to add some information to your question that I think is really for Lillian. But if we do, so that's the decision of the council or the group. But just to let everyone know, so if it is determined that multiple funding sources are going to be used, say VR is going to fund some students, and for some reason another group is going to fund other students, we just have to make sure that the rates are comparable, that we're paying about the same rate that they're paying for the other individuals. But Lillian, I think that question is mainly for you.
Thanks, guys.
I think we could have a discussion about what criteria will look like and have it be flexible based on funding sources. I just think we need to be very wise about modifying the criteria that we've already put in place, just because we've put a lot of thought into it and kept, the integrity of the program at the forefront of our mind when developing this. And so I think when developing criteria, we need to be cautious. So just for clarification purposes, they would have to be in the VR system. The delegates would have to be in the VR system already or going to be into the VR system in order for LRS to provide funding.
Correct. But let me specify or explain. So if I fund this strictly under pre-employment transition services, if the individuals are strictly receiving those 5 activities, they can be potentially eligible, meaning they don't have to do the full VR application. They can just do a pre-ETS application. But if they're going to receive any supportive services, such as transportation or housing, they do have to apply for the full VR program.
Okay, thank you. And so, Bambi, is your hand up from earlier or is it another? Okay, Liz, I see that you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Jill. I'm going to say something else, but just in that aspect, I'd be cautious about doing that, because one of the things with partners we found is that the application required you to say, are you receiving services from OCDD? And that really restricted a lot of people who just didn't choose to do it or didn't even know that that was out there for a waiver. So I'd just be real cautious that would be cutting off people that potentially could be excellent delegates that just are not receiving services for the reason they just didn't know that they were out there, or the families had chosen not to do that. So I just wanted to mention that, so that on that. But the other thing is, I think there's an option there, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think from the way Melissa's explaining this, that has the potential for the funding of those who are already in the system to be able to provide funding for those through the VR pre-ETS. But then at the same time, if we look to see what other agencies are able to help, then you could potentially include it bigger and still have the funding availability for others who may not qualify for VR, who may not want to go through that specific area. I would think that a lot of these probably would be pre-ETS or potentially pre-ETS, because we're talking about high school students that are potentially in, special education services. So I would think they were, but for those who weren't, I would like to be able to have an open option, which could be based on the other agencies coming forth with money.
Thank you, Liz. I think you make a lot of good points. I agree with what you were saying, but you said it much more eloquently than I ever could. So Ms. Jordan, I see your hand up is next.
Oh.
Thanks, Lillian. And I wasn't sure, Lillian, are you ready for us to move on, or are you still addressing questions to Melissa?
Do we have any further discussion specifically for or about potential LRS funding? Okay, I think, oh, Jill, I see you have your hand raised.
I didn't even realize that I got OCDD service until after I came home from my first council meeting and all my waiver paperwork said OCDD. I was like, oh, okay, makes sense.
I think
That's
that's,
a little funny for y'all.
I mean, that's such a great point about how sometimes you don't even realize that you're receiving services from specific agencies, especially because as people with disabilities, we deal with so many different state agencies on a daily basis that keeping all your ducks in a row is impossible sometimes. So just for context too, for our guests, we came up between last meeting and this meeting, we came up with an approximate figure for what we would expect YLF would cost in the first year, and that would be approximately $50,000. So that's our estimated figure. So Ms. Jordan, would you like to go next?
Yes, I was going to say this would be a contract for LDOE purposes to help fund. And I was going back as we were talking to kind of look at some of our activities in our current grant application and how that would align. But this is perfect timing because we are starting to plan for our next fiscal year budget. So this is perfect timing. One thing that I would suggest, and this may be in the plan, Lillian, would be, including something in this about for these students to like coordination of services within agencies, talking about transitions to post-secondary. I know if LRS is doing a presentation, that would be included. And I think, those are certainly services and aspects that would be covered through IDA. And I know, Lillian, I may be missing some information or like what this is going to look like for Louisiana. I did see you sent out some information from Oklahoma, but like, I would just be curious too, I think, to see like, what does this mean for Louisiana? And I think that may be coming, just to make sure that we're kind of in an alignment where IDA could be positioned to support. And I'm just excited. I'm looking forward to it. I'm also curious, Lillian, I know you talked about 15 delegates, but is there a way, or is this like, we're thinking about starting with 15 and then maybe scaling up in the future?
That's exactly the plan, actually. And so that's both the plan for the duration of the forum and also the amount of delegates. So initially we're starting out with that 3-day overnight forum and 15 delegates. But the idea is each year we may bump that up. So maybe the next year it'll be 25 delegates in 4 days. And then the next year it may be 35 in 5 days. So it just kind of depends. But we're definitely starting small for a pilot year initially, just to feel everything out.
Okay. And so the lead agency would be the Developmental Disabilities Council, right? And so that's who our contract would have to be with.
Amy, are you still on?
I'm still on. I don't know the answer. I need to think about it.
Okay. Liz, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I know we were talking about it. I don't think that we set in stone who would be the lead agency or how it worked. We were more just worried about finding the funding and having the capability of being able to do that. So obviously, from your perspective, Meredith, there would have to be who you would write the contract to, but I don't think we specified yet because we were still looking to see where we could get the funding, how much the funding and things like that. Because we also know that the funding will be less in the beginning as we start out with just 15, but then as we expand and see how it worked, then we'll be looking for more funding. So it's definitely something that we're planning to grow in each year, but I don't think it was determined that, it could be equal one across the board, and then would have to find out who would actually be able to accept the funding if it was like that. So I think those are things we still need to talk about too, Lillian.
And I have a suggestion. I know that's something I'm April with Families Helping Families and Maddie's mom.
We talked about caregivers attending with the participants. So that was something we briefly touched on last time. So is the funding going to be included with the caregivers too? If the kids need to have that person with them at the camp or wherever?
So I think we're still hashing out what support services would look like at YLF, because I know we started to have a robust discussion about that at our last meeting, and we ran out of time because it wasn't necessarily an agenda item. And I think that we're planning to really hash that out into specifics very soon. I will give a quick little interesting fun fact. In Oklahoma, who I have great contacts with, they've been running YLFs for over 15 years now. They actually don't have caregivers come with the participants. They hire nursing staff for overnight, and they try to use predominantly natural supports during the day among just the staff and the delegates. And at first, it seemed kind of like a crazy idea, like, well, what are people going to do without their DSPs? But as I started talking with their ED a little bit more, it just kind of made sense, having the natural supports among the delegates and the staff and the nursing staff as needed, but not present as much. So the delegates can have as independent of an experience as possible, which is the purpose of YLF in general, to empower young people to be independent and experience what it may be like to adults for a week. So, and as far as funding goes, I think part of the reason why we don't know the role of the DDC as well is because it would have to be, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, in the annual plan, and the annual plan for, I think, next year, I think they're still taking recommendations for that. So that process, I don't think, has started yet. So the goal is to hopefully have funding from DDC, but we'll have to work that out with the full council. So Jill, I see you have your hand raised.
I think Meredith brought up a good, it was either Meredith or Liz. Something triggered my mind, but I had assumed that because this would parallel with the way partners is done, because with partners, partners have a contract with us, and then but one of the FHF centers is, and I mean this, I might be gapping out, so if you could fill in the gaps, but and then, but so we have a contract with FHF Center because they're the fiscal agent, but we are like it is contract under our council. So I just always assumed that it would be the same thing, like if, say, LDOE was and then OCDD were our fiscal agent, or two of our fiscal agents for this program, then they would have the contract with us, and then we would have the contract, like we would contract with the fiscal agents, but then the program itself would be under our umbrella. But that doesn't seem right either, because the way it sounded, something that didn't sound right in my head. But Liz, take over, please, because you know this. I do not.
All right, Liz, you want to take a stab at it?
So Jill, I know exactly where you're going and it's making sense. What could happen is there could be a fiscal agent, like one of the Families Helping Families could be the fiscal agent, but then could accept the funds from the LDOE, from LRS, from the DD Council, and all those funds could be mixed together to produce the YLF. So yes, I hear exactly what you're going, because that's it. The DD Council gives the funds to Families Helping Families at the Crossroads, and Families Helping Families Crossroads had hired the coordinator to run the program. So it's the same type of thing. Yeah, I definitely could. That's where you were going. So that you're right. You're absolutely right.
So it's still under our contract because it's our money.
Correct. But if you had different funding sources, then it wouldn't be controlled by one. It would have to be, the contracts would each individually control what they were looking for in that specific partnership with YLF. Does that make sense? The DD Council puts up all the money for partners. So that's where you're going with that. That's fully funded by the DD Council. So it is their contract because they put up the funding for it and then hire Families Helping Families of Crossroads. But if you have differing funding sources, then one agency doesn't control. They just for instance, Families Helping Families all have contracts with different agencies. So the Families Helping Families runs it, but there's deliverables under each of the contracts that they have to abide by. Does that make sense, Jill?
That is what I was missing. Thank you.
You're welcome. Can I just say one thing, Lillian, to Meredith? Okay, so Meredith, I heard you saying, so is this, I guess it kind of goes with what April was asking Maddie's mom, as well as with you. I know that years and years ago, they used to do the parent weekends where they'd have LDOE would give the parent weekends where you could, mom and dad could go. It wasn't for the students, but the mom and dad could go and attend the weekend. They'd put them up in a hotel and stuff like that. So it's still, I'm assuming that you still have that sort of funding to be able to do the same thing for actual students. Actually, you probably have more money to be able to do something like that under IDA for the students. Is that what you were saying? I kind of got lost for a second.
Yes. Yeah. Like okay. I know that I have like some activities, some grant activities that this would fit under. I'm going to have to check, Liz, on the parent or like the, funding the families to also attend, or a caregiver.
Right. And so what I will add to that is that I know with partners, because partners was federal money. So the federal money fed down into DD Council and then D Council. If any families were on waivers or things like that, we could not pay because it was already being paid by federal money. So the only way that it could be done is if somebody didn't have a waiver, then state money could help. Then federal money could help provide it, but they had to use their own waiver if they had it for partners. So the families had to use their own thing. But I do like but with that, it kind of goes back with what Lillian said. When we did that, if an individual with a disability came through partners and they had somebody with them to help them, they were not allowed to speak for them. They were not allowed to sit at the table. I would request that they sat at the back table with me and allowed them to have the freedom to be able to share and open, and they were only there for the necessities of caregiving if needed. So I can see why the different agencies do that, because I do think it's a way to definitely let them have their voice and let them have the freedom to become independent.
If there's any way that someone from the DD Council staff could send in the chat, like maybe our timeline document for purposes, so we can share that with our guests, so they have that information and context available for where the committee is moving forward and what decisions are going to be made soon and which decisions have already been made. But as far as what you guys need from us, so moving forward, what type of specific information that can we provide for you guys so we can start moving forward and planning and seeing if this could actually work, this collaboration between state agencies and a potential YLF?
Lillian, I'm sorry, I'm not able to raise my hand. This is Julie. Can I just jump in real quick?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to, before we jump into the other, I guess, I don't know if there's other state agencies. From the OCDD perspective, we would be very supportive of the program in any way we could. However, I'm having trouble kind of wrapping my mind around how we would be able to support from a funding perspective. You know, I think a lot of other folks are talking about contracts, and I don't have available contract money or grants right now. It is something that is possible and we could, but we would have to present it as part of our budget request as a new and expanded program, and then go through the legislative process to get funded for it. So for, if you're looking kind of for quick money, that I don't know that we would be able to do that. If we did want to look at it down the road, you know, again, that would be something we would look at. It might get complicated for us if it's kind of that braided funding. We would have to be able to kind of clearly show for OCDD, you know, for our portion, what portion of the contract are we doing? What are the deliverables, you know, and have that contract monitor. And so I just wanted to kind of share that if there was something that we needed to look at being able to do, you know, specific to those people who have waiver, we've kind of talked about that. So if there are delegates who are waiver participants and there's something that we might be able to do to tweak a waiver service to be able to support them while participating, we can definitely, you know, take a look at that to be able to be supportive. But in terms of the contracts, that would be a longer term process for us to be able to figure that out. So just wanted to jump in and share that.
Thank you for that information. And I think that's great to keep in mind as we move forward as a committee, to keep in mind, like you said, long-term, where we say, okay, we want to see this expand over the years, and maybe over the years that includes involvement from OCDD, however that needs to look like. I think Ms. Bayham, you were next. It's difficult keeping track of all the hands.
No problem. I was just going to say, Lillian, the easiest thing for me to be able to give you some more definitive information is if I can get like a copy of the budget and what, you know, what's in your budget, like how you came up with the figures, you know, what you're anticipating costing and things like that. I think it is important for us to figure out who I guess we would call the fiscal agent would be. You know, is it going to be the DD Council? You know, because if it's going to be an IAT, an interagency transfer, then we have to make sure that that's budgeted correctly. So yeah, it would just be important for us just to get some of that type of information, and then I could get some better, more definitive information for you. And just to kind of throw an idea that I thought of while Julie was speaking, like some of the PCA or the caregiving, LRS may or may not be able to fund that, but maybe that's something like that. Maybe potentially OCDD could fund if the person's on a waiver, just to kind of throw that idea out there of how we might braid the funding.
Thank you. Bambi, I think you're next.
Yeah, so Julie and Melissa kind of answered my hand. my question, but the other point I wanted to make was what Julie said in regards to, could use maybe waiver funds if a person had a waiver. I was also thinking about how, the LGEs, people can always make requests for the IFS. My only hesitation is that I don't always think we should go to state general funds as a last option. If there's ways that we can access our federal funds, but yeah, that was it. I just want to make that point, to access our federal funds before going to those funds that are straight state general funds.
All right, we have Liz next, and then we have Mr. Charlie, one of our guests.
Yeah, I am just going to reiterate what Bambi said, because that was what I was thinking, is the state general funds for LGEs, that they may have that option and be able to help in some situations based on those who do not have waivers yet, but are considered have a statement of approval. So I definitely think that that's an option too, that they will be able to do that.
Okay, Bambi, see, you have your hand raised.
I knew there was another point I wanted to make, So at the beginning of the meeting, you said something about independent living centers in some states help out. And I was just thinking, as we're having this conversation, that there are many of our entities that do work, that get funding to do certain type of work and have certain type of outcomes, that's potential partners that we can look at, that, we'll be helping them to do the objective that they're, got to have funding available to do. So we should keep our eyes open for those opportunities as well. Our independent living center, I was thinking about, if we happen to have any delegates that are deaf, connecting with the Commission for the Deaf, those type of things. So anyway, just wanted to make that point. Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Charlie is next.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes,
okay.
Hello.
Good. Just a couple of quick points. One is I wanted to piggyback on what Liz had said, whether it's in an environment of a camp or a meeting or whatever, there's a lot of research that supports that too much support fosters dependence rather than independence. So I think making the whole experience teachable helps. Since this is a youth leadership forum, I think it helps to further that particular goal. So keep that in mind. I hope that we'll keep that in mind as we're moving forward, because I think it's a great idea. Let's just maximize all the opportunities that we have in the process. And the other thing, as y'all are going through and discussing the funding and all the different venues, I heard y'all mention Families Helping Families as a possibility. I'm going to ask that maybe one of our directors be allowed to participate in those discussions, so that we can provide feedback on how it would impact us, how we could benefit y'all, whatever the deal is. Whether it goes through Families Helping Families or not, we're always ready to be partners for anything that's going to help the youth and the adults with disabilities in our community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, definitely. Well, I hope to see you at future meetings too. Okay, so I see that he's going back to attendees, so thank you, Mr. Charlie. Where were we? Okay, so it seems like from LRS, it's important that, the delegates are in the Vogue rehab system, but we need to have a copy of the budget, like what's in the budget and specifics on who the fiscal agent is going to be. And from LDOE, a program overview with purposes and objectives of the program. So, hey, Jill, I see that you have your hand raised.
You can finish your thought, and no one interrupts you. But
no, I was actually done.
Okay. And Dr. Michelle, we would love you on our committee. You always bring such great perspective. you can join your sister agency, Nicole. But
Jill has made an executive decision for the committee that Charlie is now a part of it.
and I did my part. I recruited someone because but that's not my question. Now after all this discussion, like I'm thinking, did we as a committee really sit down and specifically make a budget? Because I'm thinking now we should, like how we called this special meeting, we should maybe before April have a specific budget meeting.
We can. And then I know at the April meeting too, we're looking at finalizing our list of topics. So that will lend to that program overview where we really can narrow down those objectives and purpose of the program. And so it may behoove us to have a specific budget meeting so we can really hash out those specifics of what the funding's going to look like. Harlan says we do have a FHF director on this committee. Yes, Miss Nicole Flores, and we love having her.
I thought I said that. Did that
Why,
not?
thank you.
Is that not what I said?
Yes, you did.
Okay, because my heart dropped, y'all. Shoot.
Well, moving forward, I'm going to request that Miss Jordan, Miss Bayham, and Miss Foster Hagen will be copied onto the future emails regarding YLF. So if you would like, you can tune in as we further develop this program and hash out what this is going to look like, because we definitely are looking forward to your agency's potential involvement. So do you have any further questions for our committee that maybe we could answer for you today?
Lillian, do y'all have pre-scheduled meetings already and have like a set time frame that you guys meet? If we could just get that, if I could get that ahead of time, it would be helpful.
Generally, we meet quarterly in conjunction like with the DDC meetings, but each meeting day and time specifically is determined by a doodle poll based on the committee members' availability.
Okay, thanks.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you guys taking the time to join us. Does any of our committee members have any more thoughts about the discussions and conversations we just had? Oh, Liz?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to Meredith, Melissa, and Julie being here, because it's exciting, and having been aware of YLF way many years ago when I first got into advocacy. I'm excited about bringing this back and thrilled that we have state agencies who want to be a part of it too and are able to share some funds, because I think this could be huge and moving forward just a bigger and better for the state of Louisiana. So I thank you, Meredith and Melissa and Julie, for being here.
Thank you.
Jill?
You said that in the April meeting we were gonna finalize the topics, but did we ever like have refresh my memory, because I don't want this to come off rude at all, but like, did we ever have an initial topic discussion?
Yes. Oh, thank you, Amy.
Shut up. Sorry. Yeah. Can you email this to me, Miss Amy?
Sure, Jill.
You know, I can't grasp it unless I read a hard copy.
Nicole, I see you have your hand raised.
Thank you.
You're on mute.
Yeah, we were talking about the topics, and just one thing, I know that there's 5 like core training modules we have, or 5 core things we have to do within the YLF manual. So it might help too, as we're looking at these, that we have those 5 that we have to do and make sure everything we're doing is aligning with that under those topics.
I think that's a great idea. And so maybe that's where we develop that, what was it called? That program overview, right? So we finalize the list of topics, but we also have those objectives in there. We have those 5 core, values or, objectives from the national manual. And we just make a comprehensive document of what this is going to look like. And so then that way we can provide it to any potential partners that we may have. So that actually segues pretty nicely into our next agenda item, or it may not be next, but let's see, is the potential changes for our timeline. So in April, it seems like we want to kind of start developing that overview, correct? Thumbs up, thumbs down.
I'm sorry, I missed the question. What was the question again, Lillian?
So it seems like since we definitely will need a program overview for this, and we already have finalized topics as our agenda item, one of our agenda items in April. Thank you, Ms. Ebony, for pulling up that timeline. It kind of seems natural to me that we would just start developing that program overview in conjunction with those 5 main items from the national manual that Nicole mentioned. I see Bambi gives a thumbs up. Liz is nodding. Okay, another thumbs up. Maddie, thumbs up or thumbs down? Awesome. Thank you.
I agree as well.
Cheney and Dylan, you have been quiet. What do you think about that plan?
I agree with that too. I give it a thumbs up when my camera was on, but yeah, I agree to that.
I agree. Thank you. And so the other thing that I wanted to discuss is 2 of the things that we had on our agenda for April was developing strategies for recruitment and diversity and outreach marketing advertising. I wanted to get your thoughts on deferring that to the July meeting, because we actually don't have anything for our quarterly July meeting because we didn't get that far when we originally created the timeline. And I think those are 2 topics that kind of needs their own meeting. What do you guys think about that?
I think that makes sense, Lillian, because as I'm looking at what's on the topic and what we need to do before that would make sense, that based on, the budget, the program overview and discussing all that is really important before we can move forward. Mm-hmm. So once we get that done, then I think doing the outreach and the marketing and making sure that we develop the strategies for recruitment diversity is definitely, we can't do it before we have the other plans in place. Okay. So I definitely think that's a good idea.
I had a question. I know that we talked about incoming 10th and 11th and 12th graders. Did y'all, and I can't remember the lady who said that, that some of it starts at 16. Have you guys decided if it was going to be 16 or 15?
Real quick, I see that Miss Jordan put in the chat that she's heading out. Thank you, Miss Jordan, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you. And I can probably hop back on in a bit, but I need to hop to one more meeting. Thank you so much, Lillian.
Okay, good luck with your meeting. So we were talking about the ages. So I think the idea was that we were going to do 10th, 11th, 12th graders with appropriate flexibility. So that, okay, maybe there's a 12th grader who may be a little bit older than your other 12th graders. You decide that on a case-by-case basis, you know, so.
The lady with LRS, she mentioned everything about 16 on up. And I know that you guys have been talking about 50. Sorry, y'all, the weather's bad here.
No worries. So yeah, maybe that's a thing that we start to narrow down when we have those further budget discussions. If LRS is needs it
just
to
for funding, that's right.
Then we can adjust as needed.
Or, you know, or just only at 16 and up.
Nicole, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, one thing we might want to check too, and just with the double check with the National Wildlife, it just says anybody with any student with a disability, as you know, per the ADA that has shown leadership potential. Do other like other agencies like LRS, they fund in other states? Like, I'm trying to think, like, because it doesn't say someone who is on a waiver, or it's open to, youth with all disabilities that show leadership. So you're going to have a lot of different people applying who wouldn't necessarily have a developmental disability.
And I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's that option where that funding can be, I think the term Ms. Baham used was braided, where maybe LRS funds the individuals who do, receive VR services, but another agency steps in and funds a different piece of it. But I think thank you for keeping that in mind about the national requirements, because throughout all this, I with the whole funding discussions and the restrictions, that conversation can get, kind of hairy, especially when discussing those national requirements and just kind of maintaining that integrity of the program. So Jill, I see that you have your hand raised.
So the YLF, the participant criteria, because I'm getting confused. It's just a disability under the ADA, not necessarily a developmental disability, correct?
Yeah, I would hate to say anything that's incorrect, but I think you're right. I think ADA is a little bit more flexible than just ED. All right, so we've moved the discussion about outreach and marketing and recruitment and diversity to July of 2022. We have a main topic in April of finalizing topics and development of program overview. Do we need to solicit volunteers for the forum in April? That seems a little bit early to me. I don't know about you guys.
That to me is kind of early if we're still trying to figure out solicit volunteer. Yeah, I think that needs to be pushed back.
Amy, go.
I'm sorry, you guys. I got really
Go
distracted. There was
up
a squirrel. Right
so I can see what we're doing in July, please. Thank you. Sorry.
So when do you want to move solicit volunteers to? The July meeting or the October?
What do you guys think?
I think at least July, when you're looking at marketing and everything and doing your outreach and starting to solicit volunteers, when you're starting to talk about it, at the same time when you're trying to get interest from delegates too, or potential delegates.
Jill, is your hand raised from earlier or is it new comment?
It's right from earlier.
Okay. Maddie, I see you have your hand raised.
I would move it to October. Probably.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense because it's like we develop the strategies for that outreach and recruitment in July, but actually put that into action by October. Does that sound reasonable to you guys? Awesome. I like the thumbs up method. It works a little bit better than others. Mr. Harlan, you've been quiet. What do you think about all this?
Well, I'm very excited about it. I really would like to get a little more information about it, as far as actually being able to look through the manuals and things like that a little bit. Being new to the committee, I haven't really had chance to dig into it like that, but having graduated from partners in policy making, at the last committee meeting discussion, talking about how this could potentially serve as a gateway to that, it's also had me thinking of a lot of other ideas about how this might potentially be able to coordinate with special ed and help develop candidates for this program through those methods as well. And I'm really excited about it. I think it could really offer some great opportunities for both personal, community, and legislative advocacy across the board. It sounds great.
Thank you. I see that Mr. Charlie in the chat says moving solicitation of volunteers is a good idea in my opinion. It will be easier to get volunteers once you have a firm date and location for the event, so they can all make appropriate plans professionally and with their families. That's a good point, because in October, we also are setting the exact date and location, which may be the most exciting part of the YLF committee. Maddie, is your hand raised from earlier or is it a new comment?
A new comment.
Okay.
I think I would have like more time to play around with it and all.
Like with the timeline?
More time
God damn.
to approach people with more information by October
Yeah.
for volunteers. I think somebody else said.
And I think you're right. Like, we'll have a lot more information about the specifics of that program, right? So we'll be able to go and kind of share the good news a little bit more specifically than we could right now. And so we've deferred some things. The last thing that we had on our agenda to discuss, other than kind of new-ish business, is possibly inviting UL, the university in Lafayette, to attend one of our meetings as a possible host location for our YLF. because UL is centrally located in the state. It already has a robust disability post-secondary program. And we already had start looking at colleges as a to-do in April. So I wanted to get you guys' input on that.
I think that sounds great. If we're going to do it on a campus, I think that's a good one. They've been very forward with their UL program, their UL, I think it's UL Life, is that what it's called? Yeah, it's, I mean, I read about it. I know there's a little girl, they used to live across the street from us, who is one of the mentors, and she absolutely loves the program and the kids there. And the fact that they have really, I mean, they've done it right. UL seems to have done it right. And I think that would be a fantastic place considering they're already familiar with it, understand it. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion.
I agree.
Then we can start setting that in motion. So I guess the question now is, I know that the to-do was for the April meeting. We'll probably have a robust meeting in April just because the finalization of topics and development of program overview will just be a, beefy topic in general. And I know there was some talk about having a meeting in between this meeting and the April meeting, so likely in March for budget. So is that something that we want to do?
I think it would be a good idea.
Okay.
What was the question again, Lillian? I'm sorry. I got lost. I heard budget.
No,
I'm sorry.
I know that earlier there was discussion about having another meeting in between this meeting and the April meeting, specifically to hash out a budget, like what this is going to look like. Because I know we have that approximate figure of $50,000, but as LRS and the other state agencies requested, we would want kind of a more specific budget. So what do you guys think about the idea that was brought up about possibly meeting again in March-ish to discuss that?
Was the budget, the $50,000 budget, was that just a guesstimate from what other Oklahoma and other people used, or did we actually crunch numbers? And I know I missed the first meeting, so I can't.
So it was a bit of a hustle because that was requested from one of our state agencies before this meeting. So me and Amy kind of crunched some numbers, and we came up with that approximate figure based on the budget that the National Wildlife Organization has provided, and some specifics to Louisiana, and the specifics that we've already decided, like the 3 days, 15 delegates, etc. So, Jill, I see you have your hand raised.
All the budget information you've been looking at, are you getting from the national, not from Oklahoma, and what you're using the Oklahoma budget is your guideline?
So there was a mock budget in the National Wildlife Manual that I provided.
And it was a California budget. It wasn't an Oklahoma budget.
Yeah. Okay.
So full disclosure, if we have a budget meeting, I don't know anything about budgets. So I will need some help from committee. So I'm putting that out there so we don't have a meeting and you guys expect me to know all this stuff about the budget. So Bambi, I see that you have your hand raised.
Well, that was kind of my question. Do we need to meet as a committee, or can we just delegate that to, the staff or something? They've heard what we needed and kind of put that together, and then we can ask questions about it. I don't know if we all need to go through all the budget items. That's just my thoughts.
That a good
makes
point.
sense. can we get some input on DD council staff from that real quick?
Sorry, I was muted. When Lily and I created around 50,000 guesstimate budget, we were working really quickly, and I don't know that I put it in a spreadsheet or anything. So I do know I can't pull anything up right now to tell you exactly where I got it. So I'd have to go back and redo my work to get the numbers that added up to 50,000. So, I mean, I can do that and send it out to the committee, and you're welcome to take a look at it. It was very rough and very much, it was based off of that budget from California, which Lillian estimated to probably be about 10 years old. So there was a lot of rounding up in numbers to try to approximate where we would be now in current rates. So yeah, I mean, I can piece that back together and send it out if that's what you'd prefer.
Liz, I see you have your hand raised. Real quick, I'm gonna say something. I'm sorry to make you wait a little bit longer.
That's fine. No, it's
what I can do is also reach out to the National YLF organization and see if they have access to any of the YLF's budget, and I'll reach out to Oklahoma so we can get more of a current estimate of how what the budgets look like for YLFs in, let's say, 2022 or like 2019 before Corona hit. So I can provide that to DD council staff so we can have kind of a better rough estimate. But like Amy said, she had to work some magic very quickly. And so big kudos to her for working that magic so quickly. So Liz.
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm happy to help in any way because I did, although I was given a budget for partners, I had to stay within a budget. So I'm very familiar with what the spending was, where we had to stay. We also need to keep in mind that state rates. So you'll have to keep, obviously you may not need hotel rates, but you still need the food rates and things like that, unless you can oversee it as a convention, or not a convention, but like a seminar, you might be able to do it. But those are all things, but I'm happy to help in any way if that's it. I do budgets for a living too. I know y'all think I just advocate, but I actually have 2 jobs running some companies, so doing the finance part of it. So I'm happy to help in any way with that.
I am so glad we have someone who knows budgets. Like, I'm so relieved. So thank you, Liz. We appreciate having you. So we've established that we may not want to have a budget meeting per se, but I'll reach out to national organizations, see if they can provide some, specific budgets from specific states to give us a little bit more guidance on that. And I guess work with DD council staff to produce something more specific to Louisiana. And I'm assuming that will be presented at April meeting. So, and we will also invite UL to April meeting. I think Maddie had her hand raised before Jill.
You know who loves budgeting and all? Mr. Charlie Michelle. Since I'm gonna.
Is he still on here?
Yes.
April, I have to send Maddie something in the mail now just to thank him for that.
That's
Yeah.
boss. So yeah, Nicole and I work together, and well, she works at FHF and Acadian, but she looked at Liz when Liz said it, and she looked at me and she's like, I know who else is good at budgeting. And I said, who? And I said, well, there you go for it.
Well, I see that Mr. Charlie has his hand raised, so can we permit him to talk, please?
Of course, absolutely.
Nicole, I'm going to save you the trouble. I'm going to send something home with her mother before you can ever get it in the mail.
Welcome.
Well, I'm glad that you attend the meetings, Mr. Charlie, and obviously Jill has made an executive decision that you're now a member of the committee. So welcome. And also coincidentally, Jill,
Just a suggestion, like if you're interested, like I was just saying, like, but I did have a question, something I was thinking about. Since we are in this never-ending public emergency, public health emergency in 2023 is not that far away. Should we like talk about maybe like, or just keep in the back of our mind, like, okay, if we can't deal with this, should we basically have a plan B?
I think you bring up a good point, Jill. I think you bring up a good point. What do the other people on the committee think about that?
I think it's something we'll always have to keep in the back of our mind just in case for really anything we do. And then as we go forward, planning it, how it's, how the program, should be, how it's envisioned at the national level as what it was made to be. But then like how Jill said, it's important just to keep that in mind,
Yeah, so we can just kind of keep it at the forefront or in the back of our minds for now, and just keep monitoring things. So I think we did a lot today. I want to congratulate the committee on some good work. The last and final thing, it'll be very quick, is that Oklahoma is having their YLF in person this summer. And I have gotten permission to share the staff application form with you guys. So if you guys want to be staff at an actual YLF, you can apply. And since she'll know that you're from Louisiana, I've asked her, I was like, if a couple of us come down, can we be staff? And so their ED over there has said yes and given me permission to share this with you guys. So what I'll do is I'll send this link to Ebony and also the manual and handbook to be sent out to the entire committee so our newer members can have that information as well. Yeah, I think that's all I have for you, but yeah, that was my bit of super exciting news for you guys. Is there any comments, questions, concerns, etc., things that we didn't discuss or missed?
Lillian, is the YLF in Oklahoma, can you watch it virtually or is it in person?
It's in person. Cool. So it seems like you guys all are just kind of staring at me at this point. I know it was kind of a longish meeting because we got into the nitty-gritty of a lot of things, and it was a different meeting than we've normally had. But I think our April meeting will be really fun as we finalize the topics and figure out objectives and figure out like the real meat of YLF and figure out what YLF is going to look like instead of the more boring budget stuff. So I'm excited, and I wanted to thank you guys for coming and for all of your hard work.
Thank you, Lillian.
Appreciate it.
All right, well, I will see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Lillian. I really enjoyed it.
I'm glad.
Stay warm, y'all.
You too. Right. Bye.
Bye, thank you.
Everyone.